Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here. This is exciting. This is the 6th-month birthday of the channel. To celebrate that birthday and the fun that we've had around the way, I'm going back to revisiting the Iceberg series of Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things by JuanThePickle. This is the 5th tier of that iceberg, and let's get spooky. Before we get going on the video, let's make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. That is The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Go ahead and share this video to Elon Musk. Email him a link to this video as part of his, what did you do last week request. Say, yeah, I watched a bunch of videos from this guy, Kenny. Or you could tweet at him, or I don't know, send him letters in the mail. Just send this to Elon, see what Elon thinks. Again, this is tier 5 of the Iceberg series. The Khamar Daban incident. The Khamar Daban incident is an event that occurred in the Khamar Daban mountains of Siberia, Russia, in August 1993. It's often compared to the Dyatlov Pass incident due to its similarities with the Dyatlov Pass incident. Here's what happened. On August 5th, 1993, on the Khamar Daban mountain range in Siberia, near Lake Baikal, a group of 7 student hikers from Kazakhstan, led by an experienced hiker, were on a hike. During their hike, 6 of the 7 hikers died suddenly and under bizarre circumstances. The sole survivor, Valentina Udachenko, described disturbing symptoms in her companions, including bleeding from the eyes and ears, foaming at the mouth, convulsions, violent behavior, including tearing at the clothes and banging heads against rocks. The official explanation, an autopsy, concluded that the cause of death for the 5 hikers were hypothermia, and for their leader, Korovina, it was a heart attack. Malnutrition was listed as a contributing factor. However, this explanation has been widely questioned due to the survivors' account and the seemingly rapid and violent nature of their deaths. Due to discrepancies between the official explanation and described events, many alternative theories have emerged, including infrasound, caused either by wind or geographic activity, potentially leading to panic or irrational behavior. A military experiment involving nerve agents. Speculation about a secret military experiment gone wrong or exposure to nerve agents possibly explaining the described symptoms. Contaminated water. Lake Baikal is known to have pollution issues, and contaminated water sources could have played a role. Mushroom poisoning. The group may have accidentally consumed poisonous or hallucinogenic mushrooms. Like the Dyatlov Pass incident, the Khamar Daban incident involves unexplained deaths of hikers in the same region of Russia, and unsettling circumstances and a lack of definitive explanation. To this day, the exact cause of the Khamar Daban incident remains a mystery, fueling speculation and conspiracy theories. Now, I've talked about the Dyatlov Pass incident before. My opinion on this particular incident is this is probably some sort of environmental or poisoning factor, right? There's obviously something in the environment that caused these people to react to this way and to die suddenly. So I think a lot of the explanations make sense, whether it's, some sort of pollution or some sort of poisoning or, some sort of contaminant that caused this sort of issue. Lasagna Cat. Lasagna Cat is a surreal and unsettling web series created by Michael Barrett. It's known for its bizarre and distorted takes on the Garfield comic strip. The core of Lasagna Cat is a reinterpretation of the Garfield comic strip. Barrett takes Garfield comics and transforms them into something completely different, often disturbing, and always bizarre. Lasagna Cat is characterized by its surreal and absurdist humor. It plays with expectations, often subverting them in unsettling and darkly comedic ways. It's essentially a surrealist art project involving Garfield. And fortunately for us, we can watch it on YouTube.
I think I'll put that dog's lights out.
Lasagna Cat episodes use a wide range of media. You'll see live action segments featuring actors portraying Garfield characters in these bizarre scenarios. crude and intentionally distorted animation styles, found footage and stock footage incorporated to create disjointed visuals. And a crucial element to the videos is the sound design, using unsettling sound effects, distorted audio, and music to enhance the bizarre atmosphere. While each episode is unique, some recurring themes include body horror, disturbing transformations and manipulations of the Garfield characters' bodies, existential dread. There's a sense of unease that permeates all of the episodes. Nonsense and non sequiturs, logic and narrative structure are often abandoned in favor of bizarre and random events. Lasagna Cat was conceived as a deconstruction of the wholesome and family-friendly Garfield comic, exposing a darker and more settling undercurrent. Lasagna Cat is essentially a cult internet series that takes Garfield and twists it into something deeply strange, often unsettling, and darkly funny. The Pink Panther Robberies. The Pink Panther Robberies refer to a series of jewelry heists carried out by a loosely connected international network of criminals primarily out of Yugoslavia, primarily out of the former Yugoslavia. They earned the nickname Pink Panthers from British investigators after a 2003 London robbery where a stolen diamond ring was found hidden in a jar of face cream, reminiscent from the scene of the 1963 movie The Pink Panther. The Pink Panthers were not a single organization, but rather a network of individuals, smaller groups operating across multiple countries, primarily in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And they're known for their meticulous planning, speed, and a little bit of a theatrical flair. Their robberies often involve careful reconnaissance, extensive planning, and surveillance of target locations. They're fast execution of the robberies, which are often carried out in broad daylight and completed within minutes. And they involve specialized roles like drivers, lookouts, and those who actually do the dirty work. Their robberies involve dramatic entrances and exits, sometimes using vehicles to smash windows or create diversions, and clean getaways, leaving little trace and quickly disappearing after the heist. They primarily target high-end jewelry stores and boutiques, stealing diamonds, gemstones, watches, and other luxury goods. And the Pink Panthers are estimated to be responsible for hundreds of robberies and billions of dollars in stolen goods over the last several decades. Many members are believed to have roots in the Balkans, particularly Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia. Some are thought to have backgrounds in the military or paramilitary groups. Despite numerous arrests and international law enforcement efforts, the Pink Panthers remain active, though perhaps in a less centralized and more fragmented form. So these guys got away with it. I don't know, I think that heists are pretty rare these days, so it's pretty fascinating when we find out that people are committing heists. And it's even more fascinating when these people are able to avoid capture. So I don't know. Obviously stealing is bad, and robberies are bad, but it's sort of fascinating that this group is able to do this and has not been caught, or at least has not been caught on a large scale. The Putney Street Jogger. The Putney Street Jogger refers to an incident that occurred on the Putney Bridge in London, England on May 5th, 2017. Here's what happened. A male jogger was running across the Putney Bridge and pushed a woman into the path of oncoming traffic. The victim was a 33-year-old woman named Lucia Brugger. She was walking across the bridge when she was shoved into the road. A bus narrowly avoided hitting Brugger, swerving at the last moment. She sustained minor injuries but was incredibly lucky to escape more serious harm or death. After pushing her, the jogger continued running without stopping or checking on the woman. He then returned across the bridge about 15 minutes later and was confronted by the victim, but he ignored her and kept running. The incident was captured on CCTV and released by the Metropolitan Police. It sparked widespread public outrage and a police investigation to identify the jogger. The CCTV footage went viral, and the search for the Putney Bridge jogger became a major news story. After a public appeal and investigation, the jogger was identified as Simon Gao. He was eventually charged and convicted of grievous bodily harm. In July 2018, he was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay compensation to the victim. The lenient sentence obviously caused further controversy. God claimed it was an accident and that he didn't see Brugger. However, the CCTV footage appeared to show a deliberate shove, and many people found his explanation and lack of remorse unconvincing. His motive is unclear, and the incident is often seen as a disturbing act of unprovoked violence. Personally, I think that this guy is a pretty bad person. He was probably acting on some sort of bizarre impulse to hurt somebody, and the fact that he got away with this without getting any further punishment or treatment is pretty problematic. And the fact that this guy is still out there is disturbing. The Westfield Watcher. The Westfield Watcher refers to a case that occurred in Westfield, New Jersey, starting in 2014. It involved a family that bought a house and were terrorized by anonymous letters from someone calling themselves the Watcher. The Brodus family, Derek and Maria Brodus, bought a house in Westfield, New Jersey for $1.3 million. They intended to move there with their 3 children. Shortly after purchasing the house, the Broaddus family started receiving anonymous handwritten letters addressed to the new owner and later specifically naming them. The letters were threatening. The letters were signed by the Watcher and claimed that the house had been watched by the writer's family for decades and generations. The letters became increasingly personal and menacing, expressing an obsessive interest in the Broaddus family, especially their children. Some excerpts include, 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Do you need the house to fill with young blood? I requested. Better for me. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in every one. Look at all the windows you can see. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. The Broaddus family became increasingly terrified and never moved into the house. They contacted police and hired private investigators to discover who was writing these letters. The previous owners, the Woods family, admitted to receiving one letter from the Watcher shortly before moving out, but they said they dismissed it as a prank. Despite extensive investigations, including DNA analysis, interviews with neighbors, and even involving the FBI, the Watcher has never been identified. The Broaddus family sued the previous owners for failing to disclose the letter they had received, and they eventually sold the house at a significant loss in 2019. Even after the sale, the identity of the Watcher remains unknown, and the case is still a subject of fascination and speculation. I imagine this is either some creepy neighbor or someone attached to the property in some way. It might even be the previous owners. Now, there is a Netflix movie or a Netflix series that was loosely based on the Watcher called The Watcher, and you can go watch that if you're more interested in this story. Nori Amaya. Nori Amaya was a 38-year-old restaurateur in Washington, D.C. who co-owned an Italian restaurant called Copies with her brother. She was found dead in her apartment on November 2nd, 2009 after being strangled. To this day, the murder is unsolved. Security footage shows her entering the apartment building on the night of her death after going out on Halloween, but did not reveal any suspects. Police have collected DNA evidence but have not found a match. Her brother believes the killer was someone she knew and that fears that person could still harm others. This is a sad case, and it's sad that she was taken from her family, and she, has loved ones who loved her, and it's a shame that they haven't been able to figure out who it is, who was involved. It's a tragedy. The Monster with 21 Faces. The Monster with 21 Faces, or the Jilkul Morinaga incident, was a series of blackmail and extortion crimes targeting Japanese confectionery companies that occurred in Japan, mostly in the Osaka area, from March 1984 until August 1985. It is one of Japan's most infamous unsolved cases, and it's known for the bizarre and theatrical nature and the intense media scrutiny and attention that it got. The primary targets were 2 major Japanese confectionery companies, Azaki Glico, which is famous for its Glico caramel candies, and Morinaga, which is another large confectionery company known for chocolates and other treats. On March 18, 1984, gunmen kidnapped Katsushi Azaki, the president of Azaki Glico, from his home. He was later released unharmed 3 days later after Glico reportedly paid a ransom to a go-between. Following the kidnapping, Glico began receiving threatening letters and phone calls from a group calling themselves the Monster with 21 Faces, a name taken from the popular Japanese detective fiction series by Edogawa Ranpo. The Monster demanded large sums of money from Glico, initially 1 billion yen, which was later reduced, and they threatened to poison Glico products if their demands were not met. Glico products were found to have been laced with sodium cyanide. This led to a massive public recall and widespread panic. Messages were left in the tampered products about boasting about the poisonings. It would then be expanded to Morinaga and other companies. When Glico proved difficult to extort further, the Monster with 21 Faces shifted their focus to Morinaga in June 1984, using similar tactics and threats and product tampering. This caused significant economic damage and public fear in the Japanese food industry. Obviously, the Monster with 21 Faces was known for theatrical letters. The Monster sent taunting and boastful letters to the police and media, often written in a Japanese script for informal writing and signed with the Monster with 21 Faces name and a distinctive glove symbol. The letters often mocked the police for their inability to catch them and contained clues and riddles that were ultimately unhelpful. The Monster seemed to enjoy the public attention and public fear they were generating. The police launched a massive investigation involving thousands of officers and significant resources. A key piece of evidence was grainy surveillance footage of a man wearing a Yomiuri Giants baseball cap near a Morinaga product drop-off point. This person became known as the Fox-Eyed Man and was widely publicized in wanted posters and media reports. Initially, the police identified Manabu Miyazaki, the son of a known Yakuza boss and criminal himself, as the Fox-Eyed Man, and another figure known as the Videotape Man, based on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. However, this identification was later dismissed due to lack of concrete proof and Miyazaki's strong alibi for the relevant periods. After over a year of terror and extortion, the Monster of 21 Faces abruptly ceased communications. On August 7, 1985, the final letter was sent to the media declaring, "We're going to stop bullying the weak companies." No further communications or activities from the monster were ever definitively linked to the case. It's important to note that the statute of limitations for all of these crimes has since lapsed. These people could come out, I guess, and, say, hey, we did this. But, as a lot of this stuff works, they could possibly be charged with other things. I don't know. I don't know anything about the Japanese legal system. So I'm willing to bet that this was some sort of disgruntled employee. In fact, I would say it's almost certainly a disgruntled employee that was somehow involved. Or, just someone else who had some sort of problem that they wanted to take out on these companies. Sabrina and Ursula Ericsson. Sabrina and Ursula Ericsson are Swedish identical twin sisters who gained notoriety for a bizarre and disturbing incident that occurred in England in May 2008. Their case is frequently referred to as the M6 motorway incident or the Twin Sisters incident. Here's what happened. Sabrina and Ursula Ericsson were 40-year-old identical twins from Sweden. They were described as having a close but somewhat codependent relationship. Leading up to the incident, they had traveled to the UK and their behavior had become increasingly erratic and concerning. The twins were seen behaving strangely in Liverpool, including refusing to pay for a bus ticket and clinging to bus staff. Police were called, but they were later released. Later that day, they were observed walking along the central reservation of the M6 motorway near Stoke-on-Trent. This is a dangerous and illegal act. Their presence on the motorway caused significant traffic disruption as vehicles swerved to avoid them. Police and highway officials arrived on the scene to try and remove them from the motorway for their own safety. However, the twins became increasingly agitated and resistant. In the footage captured by traffic camera news, Ursula ran directly into the path of a passing truck. She was struck and seriously injured, losing consciousness. Sabrina then also ran into traffic directly in front of a car. She was hit and thrown into the air, but remained conscious. Even after being hit by the vehicles, their behavior continued, as police and paramedics tried to assist them. Sabrina attacked a police officer who was trying to help her, punching her in the face. Ursula, despite her severe injuries, also became aggressive and had to be restrained. Both sisters were eventually arrested and taken into custody. Both sisters were hospitalized for their injuries. Ursula's injuries were more severe due to the truck impact. Sabrina Ericsson was charged with assault and obstructing a police officer. She was released from court without a full psychiatric evaluation after pleading guilty to these charges. She was sentenced to 1 day in prison, time served, as she had been in custody prior to the incident. It's unclear what Ursula's sentencing was. Her injuries were more serious, and it's likely she remained hospitalized for a longer period. However, I have not been able to determine whether she had pled guilty or was immediately released. Just days after the motorway incident, on May 19th, 2008, after Sabrina was released from custody, she encountered a 54-year-old man named Glenn Hollinshead, who was a former plasterer and had been trying to overcome alcohol addiction. Out of kindness, he offered her a free place to stay in his home in Fenton. Later the day, Sabrina Ericsson stabbed Glenn Hollinshead to death with a kitchen knife in his home. After the stabbing, Sabrina fled the house armed with a knife and a hammer. She was seen hitting herself on the head with the hammer. She was eventually rearrested after being tasered by the police. Sabrina was charged with the murder of Glenn Hollinshead. However, at her trial in 2009, she pled guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. A key aspect of her defense was shared psychosis, suggesting that she was influenced by her twin sister Ursula, suffering from a shared mental disorder at the time of the killing. This was accepted by the court. Sabrina Ericsson was sentenced to 5 years in prison for manslaughter. Now, this is sort of a bizarre case, and it really makes you question why she wasn't evaluated psychologically before she was released, especially afterwards when she was able to use a insanity type defense or a psychosis defense to avoid first-degree murder or intentional murder charges. And sadly, because of the fact that they did not undergo a complete psychiatric evaluation, a man died. It goes to show you just, mental health is important and mental health isn't taken seriously. And had this person, had their condition looked at in a more serious way, it probably could have saved a life. The Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a creature that supposedly inhabits the southern Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It's a cryptid. It's commonly described as worm-like, thick as a human arm, and around 2 to 5 feet long. It's described as reddish-brown in color and sometimes with spikes or barbs. It supposedly lives in sandy areas of the Gobi Desert. The deathworm moniker comes from the claims that it can kill from a distance, often attributed to spitting acid or venom. Some accounts claim it spits a corrosive substance that can kill instantly. Other stories suggest it can generate a lethal electric shock. It moves underground and sometimes emerges from the surface. This sounds like Tremors. Stories of dangerous worm-like creatures have been part of Mongolian nomadic culture for centuries, part of Mongolian folklore for centuries. These tales are passed down orally and are deeply embedded in local folklore. Western interest in the Mongolian deathworm was largely sparked by an American explorer named Roy Chapman Andrews in his 1926 book On the Trail of the Ancient Man. While he didn't claim to have seen it, he documented local Mongolian beliefs in a similar creature. There is no scientific evidence supporting the existence of this creature despite numerous expeditions and searches by cryptozoologists and adventurers over the years, and no credible scientific evidence of the Mongolian's deathworm's existence has ever been found. There are no verified photographs or videos of living Mongolian deathworm. No physical specimens of the Mongolian deathworm have ever been captured or examined by scientists. Now, this thing sounds pretty gross. It sounds pretty terrifying. And, like with most cryptids, it becomes part of folklore. Does this thing exist? It's possible. Is it likely? Very likely possible that it's just a misidentification of some sort of snake or some sort of worm or, some sort of hallucinations while being in the desert. Argleton. Argleton refers to a village that appeared on Google Maps and other online mapping services in 2009. It became an online mystery. In September 2009, people noticed a village named Argleton appearing on Google Maps in the United Kingdom. It was located in a rural area west of Lancashire, England, between the villages of Aughton and Iceberg. Despite appearing on the map, Argleton doesn't actually exist, and there are no buildings, roads, or any signs of a village at the location indicated on the map. The area was just farmland. The appearance of this non-existent village sparked online fascination. Why was it on the map? Who created it? What was its purpose? Various theories have emerged to explain Argleton's premise. One popular theory was that Argleton was a cartographic copyright trap or a paper town. Mapmakers sometimes intentionally insert fictional places to detect copyright infringement. If a competitor copies their map and includes the fake place, it's evidence of plagiarism. It could also just be data entry error. Perhaps someone accidentally created a location with a fake name. Other people believe that it's a prank or a joke by someone with access to mapping data. I think those are all reasonable explanations. I think the fact that it appeared on Google Maps is likely makes it that it was a prank because, Google, those Google developers are always sort of creating jokes out there. They've got jokes, they've got pranks. So it should be noted, however, that Google has never given a detailed explanation for how it happened or who was responsible for adding this town to the map. They did acknowledge the existence of Argleton on their maps, and then they removed it. Martin Laurel. Martin Laurel was a sideshow performer best known as the Human Owl, or Bobby the Boy with the Revolving Head. His unique act involved his ability to rotate his head 180 degrees backwards. Ooh. He could turn his head completely backwards, allowing him to face directly behind him while his body faced forward. This was a physical anomaly, not an illusion. He toured extensively with sideshows and circuses, most notably Ripley's Believe It or Not and Ringling Brothers. His act was a major draw to its bizarre and visually striking nature. He was billed as the Human Owl because of his owl-like ability to rotate his head. The name emphasized the unusual and animalistic aspect of his performance. There is no known medical explanation available why he was able to do this. However, it's likely that Lorella had some form of anatomical anomaly in his neck vertebrae, ligaments, or muscles that allowed this extreme range of motion. It's important to note that such extreme rotation would be impossible for most people and even dangerous. He immigrated to the United States in the early 20th century and spent much of his performing career in America. He achieved considerable fame and recognition during this time as a sideshow performer, becoming a well-known figure in popular culture His image and story continues to be circulated in books and online content about unusual human abilities and sideshow history. Martin died in 1955. Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov was a Soviet Navy officer who is credited with preventing a potential nuclear catastrophe during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Arkhipov was serving as a flotilla chief of staff on board the Soviet submarine B-59, a diesel-powered submarine armed with nuclear torpedoes. In October 1962, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were extremely high due to the placement of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. The U.S. Navy was enforcing a naval blockade around Cuba, and Soviet submarines were attempting to break through. The B-59 was operating in the Atlantic near Cuba, and it was detected by the U.S. Navy and surrounded by destroyers. 3 U.S. destroyers began dropping practice depth charges, non-explosive, to force the submarine to surface and identify itself. Inside the cramped and overheated submarine, communication with Moscow had been lost. The submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, believed that war might have already broken out and became increasingly agitated. They ordered the nuclear torpedo to be prepared for firing. The standard Soviet procedure at the time required the launch of a nuclear weapon, required the agreement of 3 officers on board: the captain, the political officer, and the flotilla chief of staff. Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. He argued against it and eventually convinced Savitsky to surface the submarine and await orders from Moscow. Had Arkhipov not intervened and the B-59 launched its nuclear torpedo, likely against a U.S. Navy vessel, it could have triggered a devastating escalation, potentially leading to a full-scale nuclear war between the U.S. and Soviet Union. Soviets widely believe he prevented a global catastrophe. It's sort of incredible that this guy had a incredible role in sort of saving the world from nuclear disaster, and that he's relatively unknown. One of those sort of neat little history tidbits that happened during this bizarre time of the Cold War. Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart was a Belgian-born British Army officer who is famous for his extraordinary courage, spanning multiple conflicts from the Second Boer War to World War II. He's described as a real-life action man due to his numerous injuries and unwavering determination. He was born into an aristocratic Belgian family in 1880, joined the British Army in 1899 to fight the Second Boer War. He served in World War I and was involved in heavy fighting and sustained horrific injuries. He lost an eye. He was shot in the face in 1914 during the Second Battle of Ypres, losing his left eye. He supposedly tore off his dangling eye himself when a doctor refused to remove it immediately. He lost his left hand during an accident in Flanders. He was severely wounded and lost his left hand. He would suffer other injuries throughout World War I. He remained in the Army after World War I, serving in various roles. In World War II, despite his age and earlier injuries, he was recalled to active duty and was involved in fighting in Norway, and later placed his head as the British military mission to Poland and then Yugoslavia. He was even captured as a prisoner of war by the Italians during World War II, but escaped. After World War II, he served in diplomatic roles, including Winston Churchill's personal representative to China. He lived to the age of 83, dying in 1963, having witnessed and participated in some of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century. What a wild story. See, I think after the first time I got hurt, I would be done with the military. Well, I wouldn't join the military anyway because I'm not cut out for that. But this guy just kept going back for more. Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, Bjorn Giever Bergeson, Truls Hellevik, and William Khamar. These 5 individuals are connected by a tragic event, the Amina's hostage crisis in Algeria in January 2013. They were all employees of the energy company Statolia and were among those killed during the terrorist attack. The only confirmed case of death by a meteorite. So this is sort of crazy, that there's only been one confirmed case of death directly by a meteorite, and it occurred in the Kurdish region of Iraq on August 22nd, 1888. There are multiple documents found in the General Directorate of State Archives of the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey claiming that a meteorite hit and killed one man while paralyzing another. The West Mesa Bone Collector. The West Mesa murders are a series of unsolved murders in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the remains of 11 women and a fetus were discovered buried in a mass grave on the West Mesa of Albuquerque between 2009 and 2010. The case is unsolved and is one of New Mexico's most notorious mysteries. In February 2009, the skeletal remains of a woman were found during a dog training exercise in a remote area of the West Mesa. The discovery led to a large-scale excavation of the site. Over the following months, authorities unearthed the remains of 11 women and one fetus from the 92-acre area of desert on the West Mesa. The victims were identified as women who had gone missing between 2001 and 2005. They were primarily from marginalized communities in Albuquerque and had backgrounds that included prostitution, drug addiction, and poverty. Most of the victims were of Hispanic ethnicity. The exact causes of the death for all victims could not be determined due to the skeletal nature of the remains and the passage of time. However, in some cases where it could be determined, the cause of death were ruled as homicides. The timeline of disappearances, which occurred in a cluster between 2001 and 2005, suggests a serial killer or killers were operating during this time frame and responsible for these victims. Also, the profile of the victims, the fact that they're from marginalized communities, they were vulnerable as sex workers, and individuals struggled with addiction, also suggests that this was the work of a serial killer. The Albuquerque Police Department launched a massive investigation, including local, state, and federal agencies. They pursued thousands of leads, interviewed numerous individuals, and collected DNA evidence. Despite the extensive investigation, no suspects have ever been definitively identified and charged in connection to the West Mesa murders. Several persons of interest have been investigated and ruled out, but the case remains unsolved. I think this is very likely a serial killer. And, it's very likely that this serial killer is still out there. And, serial killers often wait dormant for periods of time. So it could be that this serial killer starts attacking people again. So this is pretty scary. Pretty scary if you're in the Albuquerque region, or actually anywhere, because he could get up and move somewhere, right? Missing Thunderbird photos. Now, we talked about the Thunderbird before, which is a gigantic bird, right? There is supposedly a lost photograph from the late 1800s depicting this gigantic bird essentially crucified to the interior wall of side of a barn. The size of the bird was demonstrated by 6 men that had stood with their arms outstretched, fingertip to fingertip, in front of it to measure its wingspan. This photograph is said to have been printed in a frontier newspaper called Tombstone Epitaph in 1890. The issue is archived and viewable online. However, there is no photo, but there is indeed a story about a huge flying creature. Now, this is one of those things that sort of strike me as like a false memory or urban legend type situation, right? This photograph totally existed, but now it's gone from everywhere. But of course, it's also totally possible that in this time period, there were photos that showed extraordinary things that are just gone. Photographs don't last very long. And if they weren't taken care of and they weren't preserved properly, they would be gone. So I'm going to put this in a probable, not real thing, but certainly could be. Captain Cutchy's key lime pie. There is a legend surrounding Captain Cutchy's key lime pie. It is a unusual phenomenon in online comments where there are hundreds and hundreds of internet comments talking about how great Captain Cutchy's key lime pie is. And the weird thing is, this is across all sorts of online platforms. It's reviewed or discussed on social media, food blogs, review sites, and even general forums. And it goes beyond its typical "this is good" language. There's hyperbolic and exaggerated comments like "best key lime pie ever," "life-changing," "perfect," "transcendental." Certain phrases or ideas seem to recur in the comments, creating a sense of shared experience or an inside joke among those who have tried the pie. Now, I think the explanation here is there's some sort of bot or AI that sort of got out of control and just sort of posts these comments. If you see how similar the language is in a lot of these comments, it's very similar. And then I'm sure that as this mystery sort of took off, people started copycatting it and making their own Coochie's key lime pie statements. It's still a fun and bizarre mystery. Soku Shinbutsu is a Japanese term referring to Buddhist monks who practice self-mummification and are considered living Buddhas or Buddhas in their very body. It's an extremely rare practice associated with the Shingon school of Buddhism in Japan. Shoku Shinbutsu is considered the ultimate form of self-sacrifice in some Buddhist traditions. Monks who undertake this practice aim to achieve enlightenment and Buddhahood in their current lifetime through this rigorous and prolonged process of self-mummification. Sounds uncomfortable. The process of becoming shaku shimbutsu is demanding, and it takes years, sometimes decades, to complete. It's a gradual and deliberate process of preparing the body for mummification while still alive. Typically involves 3 phases, each lasting approximately 3 years. The first phase, detoxification. The monks would drastically alter their diet, eliminating fat from their bodies. They would consume a very restricted diet of nuts, seeds, and berries found in mountains. This phase was designed to reduce body fat and moisture, the key factors to preventing decomposition after death. Desiccation. The diet then becomes even more bizarre, consisting of mainly bark and roots. This continues to reduce body fat and dehydrates the body. Toward the end of this phase, monks would start drinking a tea made from urushi sap, which is highly toxic. This caused vomiting and other fluid loss, but most importantly, it was intended to poison the body and make it less attractive to insects and bacteria after death, which is supposed to aid in the preservation. The final stage is encasement and entombment. When the monk felt like they were near death, they would enter a specifically prepared stone tomb, barely larger than their body, in a seated lotus position. A bamboo air tube would be provided for minimal oxygen, and a bell was placed inside. Each day, the monk would ring the bell to signal that they were still alive. When the bell stopped ringing, it was assumed the monk had died, and the tomb would be sealed completely. Years later, the tomb would be opened. If the body was successfully mummified, meaning it hadn't decomposed but remained preserved, the monk was considered to have achieved Soku Shinbutsu and was venerated as a living Buddha, except they're no longer alive. The Soku Shinbutsu process was extremely difficult, and very few monks successfully achieved self-mummification. It's estimated that only a few dozen Shoku Shinbutsu are known to exist in Japan, mostly in temples in the Yamagata prefecture. Many monks who attempted the process died during the process, and their bodies decomposed normally. Only those who successfully mummified were considered Shoku Shinbutsu. I realize this is a religious thing. This sounds a lot like bizarre self-harm to me, but you can take it however you want. Some people find this to be incredible self-sacrifice, and some people consider this to be crazy. The practice of Shoku Shinbutsu is no longer actively practiced in the same rigorous way, and that's probably a good thing. It's probably not good to unalive yourself in this very drawn out and painful way. It's not good to unalive yourself in any way, but this sounds particularly torturous. The expanding Earth theory. The expanding Earth theory is a fringe scientific theory that proposes that the Earth has been continuously increasing in radius throughout its history, and that the continents were once joined together on a much smaller globe, covering its entire significance. This is contrary to the widely accepted scientific consensus of plate tectonics and continental drift on a planet with a relatively constant radius. Here's what the expanding Earth theory is. The central tenet is that the Earth is constantly growing in size. Proponents suggest that the Earth's radius was significantly smaller in the past, perhaps even half its current size. They argue that the continents, when placed on a smaller globe, fit together much more neatly than they do in the current-sized Earth. This is presented as an alternative explanation for the jigsaw puzzle fit of continents that is explained by plate tectonics. Expanding Earth proponents often reinterpret seafloor spreading, the creation of new oceanic mid-ocean ridges, not as evidence of plate movement on a constant radius Earth, but as direct evidence of the Earth's expansion in itself. Some proponents attempt to explain the expansion by suggesting changes in fundamental constants like gravity, or by postulating exotic matter being created within the Earth. The expanding Earth theory is overwhelmingly rejected by mainstream scientists, and it's considered pseudoscience or a fringe theory. Plate tectonics is a well-established and extensively supported theory that explains the large-scale motions of the Earth's lithosphere. There's also a wealth of other evidence against a significantly expanding Earth. For example, precise GPS and geodetic measurements show that the Earth's radius is not currently increasing at a rate that would be consistent with the expanding Earth theory. In fact, measurements show the Earth's radius is remarkably stable. Yeah, I think this is just another one of those ideas, kind of like the same as flat Earth theory, that, some people get stuck on and obsess over and no one else really considers to be real. Lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is a state of consciousness where you become aware that you're dreaming while you are still asleep. In a lucid dream, you not only know you are dreaming, but you can often gain some control over the dream's content, characters, and environment. The defining characteristic is the realization within the dream itself that this is a dream. This awareness can range from a fleeting thought to complete and stable understanding that your currently reality is a dream. There are different ways in which people can control the dream. You may simply be able to choose what you do or say within the dream or slightly alter the environment. Though some claim to experience lucid dreams where they exert significant control, changing the dream scene, summoning characters, flying, or manipulating the dream narrative. Lucid dreams are often reported to be exceptionally vivid, clear, and realistic, sometimes even more so than waking reality. Emotions in lucid dreams can also be more intense and real feeling. This can be both positive, like joy and excitement, and negative, fear, anxiety, sadness. Lucid dreams are typically remembered more clearly and vividly than non-lucid dreams. Lucid dreaming is associated with a hybrid state of consciousness, blending both aspects of REM sleep and wakefulness. The specific brain regions associated with self-awareness and higher order of cognitive functions become more active during lucid dreaming. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Waking Life, but it covers the whole concept of lucid dreamings pretty significantly. It talks about things like reality checks, regularly performing reality tests in waking life to question if you are dreaming can carry over into your dreams. Checking a clock, pinching yourself, looking in a mirror, attempting to fly or float. I know that I've experienced lucid dreaming before, or at least I feel like I have. And it's a neat concept, kind of a weird brain hack, right? Astral projection. Astral projection is the ability to voluntarily leave one's physical body and travel in an astral body to different planes of existence. It's a concept that's found in various spiritual and esoteric traditions, as well as popular culture. The core concepts of astral projection is the idea that humans possess a subtle, non-physical body called the astral body, or the light body. This body is believed to be an energetic duplicate of the physical body, but made of a finer, non-material substance. Astral projection involves consciously separating the astral body from the physical body. This separation is often described as feeling like floating, drifting, or rising out of one's physical form. Once separated, the astral body is said to be able to travel to the astral plane, a non-physical realm believed to exist beyond our ordinary physical reality. The plane is often described as having different dimensions or levels and may be populated by various entities, spirits, or landscapes. During astral projection, consciousness is believed to reside in the astral body, allowing for experiences and perceptions independent of physical sentences. Proponents claim to be able to see, hear, and interact with the astral plane environment. Astral projection is usually described as a temporary separation. The astral body is said to remain connected to the physical body by a silver cord and can return at will, or automatically when the experience ends. This is sort of one of those concepts where you think of yourself as levitating or leaving your body, and it comes down to spiritualism, right? Are you able to transcend your physical body in a sense, or quite literally transcend your physical body? It's certainly an interesting concept, but I think a lot of it has to do with just sort of the power of the brain and the way the brain can make you believe that you are doing something, even if that thing is not necessarily happening. I think a lot of this astral projection is focused on your brain, your mind, convincing itself that you're doing this. Jack Churchill. Sir John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, also known as Jack Churchill and sometimes as Fighting Jack Churchill or Mad Jack, was a British Army officer who is famed for his daring exploits and unconventional warfare style during World War II. He's become a legendary figure, particularly known for carrying a longbow, bagpipes, and a Scottish broadsword into battle. Churchill was born in 1906, working as a newspaper editor and male model before rejoining the British Army in 1926. Churchill's World War II service began in Norway during the German invasion in 1940. As part of the British Expeditionary Force, he and his unit ambushed a German patrol near Lillesand. It's widely reported that he gave the signal to attack by killing a German sergeant with a longbow and arrow. This is often cited as the last recorded instance of a British soldier killing an enemy with a longbow in combat. Churchill volunteered for the commandos and participated in numerous daring raids and operations throughout the war. He served with No. 2 Commando and later No. 3 Commando. He became known for his longbow and sword. He believed it was important for an officer to be distinct and lead from the front. While the longbow kill in Norway is widely reported, he did carry the bow and sword throughout the war. However, his long bow was destroyed early on in the war when run over by a truck. He would often play the bagpipes as he went into action, repeatedly playing Scottish tunes to inspire his men and intimidate the enemy. That people don't realize how scary bagpipes can be. You got bagpipes coming at your ass, you're probably in a lot of trouble. He was known for his extraordinary courage and leadership, often being at the forefront of attacks, seemingly fearless in the face of danger. He was involved in Operation Archery. He participated in this raid on German installations in Norway, earning the Military Cross. The Salerno landings in Italy. He was commander of the No. 2 Commando, and he led a landing at Salerno. He and his men captured a German mortar position, taking 42 prisoners using only swords. He was awarded an award for this action. Yugoslavia in 1944. He served with commandos in Yugoslavia. He would eventually be captured in Yugoslavia by Germans. He was sent to a concentration camp, but managed to escape with a Royal Air Force officer. They were recaptured near Rostock and later transferred to a special prisoner of war camp for prominent prisoners. He eventually escaped again from this camp in April 1945, just before the war's end. Walked over 100 miles to Italy, where he met with American forces. After his distinct military career, he would then become an actor. Susan Kuhnhausen. Susan Kuhnhausen, or Susan Walters, is an emergency room nurse who survived a murder-for-hire plot in September 2006. Her husband, Michael Kuhnhausen, hired a hitman, Ed Haffey, to kill her at her home in southeast Portland. Upon arriving home after finishing her shift at Providence Portland Medical Center, Susan was attacked by Haffey, who ambushed her with a claw hammer. Despite being struck in the head, Susan, who was 51 years old at the time, fought back. She drew on her strength and her self-defense training and managed to disarm Haffey, wrestle him to the ground, and strangle him to death in self-defense. During the attack, Haffey only spoke 2 words: "You're strong." The statement made Susan realize that he was there to kill her. After Haffey stopped moving, she fled to a neighbor's house and called 911. She later learned that Haffey had died. Police investigations revealed that Susan's husband had paid Ed Haffey $50,000 to kill her. Michael Kuhnhausen went into hiding but was apprehended a week later. Susan obviously filed for divorce and changed her last name to Walters. Michael Kuhnhausen was convicted for orchestrating the murder-for-hire plot and died of cancer in prison before his scheduled release. Susan Kuhnhausen became a victim advocate in Portland, sharing her story and offering support to other crime victims. The Lead Masks Case. The Lead Mask Case, also known as the Vintum Lead Mask Case, is an unsolved mystery surrounding the deaths of 2 electronics technicians in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in August 1966. On August 20th, 1966, the bodies of Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were discovered by a hiker. The discovery was made a few days after their deaths, as the area was remote and difficult to access. The scene where the bodies were found was unusual and has established the mystery involving the case. Each man was wearing a crude homemade lead mask that covered their eyes and foreheads. They were dressed in formal suits, despite the remote location and hot weather. A notebook was found near their bodies containing cryptic notes and symbols seemingly related to spiritualism and possibly instructions of some kind of experiment. Some notes mentioned "be at the determined place, ingest capsules, and after signal protect metals," further fueling speculation about their activities. An empty water bottle and a towel were also found nearby. There were no obvious signs of violence or struggle at the scene. The bodies were laying side by side. The initial police investigation was hampered by the remote location and the time elapsed between the bodies were found. Some believe that this was an unaliving pact, perhaps as part of some spiritual ritual. The lead masks and cryptic notes seem to support this idea. However, there was no clear note, and the circumstances are still very strange. Murder is also considered, but there were no obvious signs of struggle or gunshot wounds. Toxicology tests were conducted, but no common poisons were detected. Of course, as with any bizarre case, aliens are suggested. Some speculate that the men were involved in some kind of extraterrestrial contact or experiment gone wrong. The case has been revisited and re-examined, particularly with advances in forensic science, and the initial investigation has been criticized as being somewhat rushed and possibly mishandled. Some people believe that more advanced toxicology analysis might be warranted to look at the substances that might not have been detectable in 1960s technology. However, it's unclear if this has ever been done, and it probably will never be done. To this day, the official cause of death remains undetermined. This is certainly a weird situation, and I think that the most likely situation is these are 2 people that were involved in some sort of fringe religious practice or some sort of other fringe spiritual practice and decided to go and do this. I think the unaliving theory is probably most likely. I mean, it says the note said to ingest capsules, which I think is pretty clear to me. The shark arm case. Oh boy. The shark arm case is a mystery that originated in, of course, Australia. It's a real-life event that involves a tiger shark, a human arm, and a web of crime. In April 1935, a large tiger shark was caught at the Coogee Beach near Sydney, Australia, and it was taken to the Coogee Aquarium. On April 17th, the shark vomited while in captivity and regurgitated a human arm. Oops, how did that get there? The human arm was identified as a left human arm that had been severed by a clean cut. It's clearly not bitten off by the shark. A tattoo of a boxer on the forearm, along with fingerprints, helped identify the arm as belonging to James Smith, a man who was missing and had a criminal past. James Smith was known as a criminal and informer in Sydney. He had been missing for several weeks prior to the shark incident, and his criminal activities included forgery and fraud. Shark fraud, perhaps. Further examination of the contents of the shark's stomach revealed not only the arm, but also a rat and a bird, although that's pretty normal for a shark. There were no other body parts, and specifically no other body parts of James Smith found in the shark, only the arm. This suggests that the shark had only ingested the arm after it had already been severed. The police began investigating on determining how James Smith's arm ended up in the shark and what happened to the rest of his body. There were key suspects. Patrick Brady. Patrick Brady was a known associate of James Smith who also had a criminal record. He was the last person who had seen Smith before his disappearance. Brady was also said to have financial dealings with Smith and owed him money. Reginald Holmes. Reginald Holmes was a boat builder and known criminal figure and drug dealer in Sydney. He was also associated with Smith and Brady. Holmes was suspected of being involved in various illegal activities, including smuggling. The leading theory is that Patrick Brady murdered James Smith, possibly due to a debt or criminal dispute. The motive is believed to be related to insurance fraud. It's suspected that Smith and Brady were involved in an insurance fraud scheme where they intended to fake Smith's death to collect on a life insurance policy. And the plan possibly went horribly wrong. I would say so. Body parts are ending up in sharks. The idea emerged that the shark was used as a way to dispose of Smith's body, or at least part of it, after he was murdered. The clean cut of the arm suggested it was deliberately severed, not bitten off. The case took another bizarre turn when Reginald Holmes was found dead in his car in Lavender Bay, Sydney, in June 1935. He had been shot in the head. His death was officially ruled a suicide, but many suspect foul play, perhaps to silence him and prevent him from revealing information about Smith's death. Despite extensive investigation, numerous witnesses, and strong suspicions, no one has ever been charged with murder in the shark arm case. There was insufficient evidence to definitively prove who killed James Smith or how his arm ended up in the shark. Patrick Brady was initially charged with murder but was released due to lack of evidence. The shark arm case remains an unsolved mystery and a bizarre crime. I'm sure it was probable that Smith was unalived by somebody. Probably his body was probably thrown into the ocean and, the arm ended up in the shark. Who knows what happened to the rest of the body? Maybe other animals ate it. Maybe it just sort of decomposed. So, the shark is an interesting aspect of it, but probably not a huge, this probably wouldn't be as interesting of a story had, the shark not ate the guy's arm. Celine Delgado Lopez. Celine Delgado Lopez is a name that is associated with an internet urban legend. There is no evidence that Celine Delgado Lopez is a real missing person. The mystery centers around a specific photograph of a young woman with dark hair and eyes, and the image is widely circulated online alongside the name Celine Delgado Lopez. The accompanying text usually claim that Celine Delgado Lopez is a missing person who disappeared in Mexico, often stating that she had been missing since the 1990s or early 2000s. The message often urges people to share the image to help find her. The image and story has been widely spread on social media platforms, messaging apps, and online forums, particularly in Spanish-speaking internet communities. It often resurfaces, going viral again and again and again. There is a lack of official missing person record of her. Despite the widespread circulation of the image and claims, no official missing person reports or records for a Celine Delgado Lopez matching the description and time frame have ever been verified by authorities in Mexico or elsewhere. Law enforcement agencies and missing person databases do not list anyone by that name matching the circulated details. The Celine Delgado Lopez phenomenon is now regarded to be an internet urban legend. It's believed to have been originated online, possibly as a fabricated story intended to be unsettling or to test the spread of misinformation online. Some theories have suggested the image may have originated from a Venezuelan television broadcast glitch in the late 1990s or early 2000s. The image may have briefly appeared on screen during a technical issue, and someone online created the missing person story around it. However, the origin is speculative and not definitively proven. This is one of those situations where it appears to be, a television glitch that caused some sort of creepy situation, and people wanting to, ramp up the creepiness of it, create a whole story around it, your typical creepypasta, internet urban legend type story. And the picture's disturbing, so it helps. Sneha Philip. Sneha Ann Philip was a 28-year-old Indian-American physician who disappeared on September 10th, 2001, the day before the September 11th terrorist attacks. She was last seen on the afternoon of September 10th, 2001, shopping at Century 21 department store in downtown Manhattan. The store is very close to the World Trade Center, or where the World Trade Center was. Her husband, Ron Lieberman, reported her missing on the morning of September 11th, 2001. He stated that Sneha had gone out the previous day to run errands and had not returned to their apartment in Battery Park City. Because she was last seen near the World Trade Center the day before the terrorist attacks and was missing when the terrorist attacks occurred, there was initial speculation and public assumption that Sneha may have been a victim of 9/11. However, her remains were not found at Ground Zero, despite extensive searches of the World Trade Center for victims. And she was never identified as a victim in the immediate aftermath. There are several possible theories. The first was that she was a 9/11 victim, which was what it was initially assumed. However, the lack of remains and official confirmation make it very unlikely that she died in the attacks. There's also theories that she ran away, was involved in foul play unrelated to 9/11, or disappearance was related to foul play unrelated to 9/11, or that she had an accident elsewhere. Some also believe that perhaps she decided she wanted to disappear intentionally and start a new life, although there's no concrete evidence for any of this. Sneha's husband and her family initially fought to have her recognized as a victim of 9/11. Eventually, in 2004, a court declared that she was not a 9/11 victim. However, the decision was later overturned in 2008 by an appeals court, which declared her a victim of 9/11. The ruling was based partly on the argument that if she had been near the World Trade Center on September 11th, it was plausible that she could have been caught in the attacks while trying to help as a doctor, or caught some other way. Despite this, as I said earlier, her body was never recovered at Ground Zero. Despite the legal rulings and theories, her disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Now, personally, I think that this is just someone who disappeared for whatever reason and just happened to have the unlucky experience of disappearing at the time and place of September 11th. If this person was kidnapped or, decided to disappear on her own, regardless of what that led to, the September 11th attacks obviously was a cover enough, or was a bigger deal enough to exhaust resources for her to either, fully disappear, or for whatever happened to her to happen to her without the scrutiny of law enforcement. I hope that she's still alive and she's okay somewhere, but I also think that that's very unlikely. Armin Meiwes. Armin Meiwes, often referred to as a Rottenburg cannibal or master butcher, is a German man who gained international notoriety for committing an act of consensual cannibalism in 2001. In March 2001, Armin Meiwes met Bernd Jürgen Brandes through an online forum for cannibalism fantasies. Both men expressed a desire to be eaten or to eat someone. Brandes willingly traveled to Meiwes' remote farmhouse in Rottenburg, Germany, with an explicit purpose of being killed and eaten by Meiwes. They spent hours together, during which Brandes reportedly consented to every step of what was to happen. Meiwes filmed the entire process of dismembering and eating Brandes. The video footage became crucial evidence in the subsequent trial. Over the following months, Meiwes consumed portions of Brandes' body, stored other parts in his freezer. Meiwes sought out other potential victims online, expressing a desire for younger flesh. One individual he contacted became suspicious and alerted the police. Meiwes was arrested in December 2001. Police found the video recordings and remaining body parts at his home. The case raised legal and ethical questions about consensual cannibalism, because it was not explicitly illegal in Germany. The prosecution had to argue that Meiwes was guilty of murder, not just assisted suicide or manslaughter. Meiwes was initially convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8.5 years of prison. The court at the time accepted that Brandes had consented to his death. The initial verdict was deemed too lenient by many and was overturned on appeal. The higher regional court in Frankfurt ordered a retrial on the murder charges. In May 2006, Armin Meiwes was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The court ruled that his crime constituted murder because it was committed for sexual gratification, necrophilia, and cannibalism, and that Brandy's consent was not legally relevant in this context. Psychiatric evaluations of Meiwes suggested that he suffered from personality disorders and fantasies, but he was deemed legally sane and fully responsible for his actions. His motivations appeared to be rooted in deep-seated personal fantasies and a desire for intimacy and control, albeit in a horrific form. Armin Meiwes is currently serving a life sentence in Germany. In 2024, a German court rejected his appeal for early release, confirming he would be imprisoned for life. Now, this brings up a lot of questions of consent. A lot of ethical questions there. A lot of people argue that people do have a right to die if they so want to. I don't know. You can tell me what you think about that. I know that theory has been taking shape and has been advancing, albeit slowly, in the last few years, or especially in the last few decades. Adam Rainer. Adam Rainer was an Austrian man who is the only person in medical history to have been documented as both a little person and a giant during his lifetime. He was born in Graz, Austria in 1899. As a young man, he was notably short. At 19, he measured only 4 foot 8 inches, which at the time was below the cutoff for being a little person. So he was considered a little person. He was of slight build and considered weak. He tried to enlist in the army during World War I twice and was rejected both times. Around age 21, Rainer began an extraordinary and rapid growth spurt. Over the next decade, he grew dramatically. By the age of 32, he had reached the height of 7 foot 1.75 inches. This is the gain of over 2.5 inches in just over a decade. The rapid growth indicated the onset of gigantism caused by the excessive production of growth hormone. Doctors diagnosed him with acromegaly, a condition usually caused by a tumor in the pituitary gland. This tumor disrupts the normal production of growth hormone. His gigantism was accompanied by a range of other health problems, such as a spinal curvature. He became increasingly weak and eventually was bedridden. And he started losing his sight and hearing. At age 31, doctors operated to remove the pituitary tumor. The surgery was partially successful in slowing down his growth, but it didn't stop it entirely. Even after surgery, his spine continued to curve. Adam Rainer died in 1950 at the age of 51. At the time of his death, he measured 7 foot 8 inches tall. This means that he grew nearly 3 feet after being considered a little person at age 19. This is a pretty crazy case, and it sounds like a pretty uncomfortable situation to be in. I feel bad for this guy, and it feels like his life was pretty awful based on all of these health problems related to this wild growth. And that's the end of part 1 of tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by JuanThePickle. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer, so you can keep following these Iceberg videos and see my other videos. Make sure that you like this video and share it. Make sure you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is akbruce. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter also. My username is akbruce there as well. There is a super thanks button in the YouTube toolbar if you would like to make a donation to the channel to support the channel. You can click that and make a donation. I would appreciate it. And if there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, please send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I appreciate you watching my videos over the last 6 months. It's been a fun ride, and I'm excited to, keep doing this for you guys. I appreciate the support that you guys have given me in your comments and your emails. And I appreciate how you all have stayed spooky.